All right, we're going to go over one of each, starting with, this is the very back of your note sheet here. We're going to do numbers 1, 2, and 7, which is one of each shape. All right. First thing, we are always going to write our formula first. So I'm going to identify right away that this is a cylinder. I'm going to go to my formula sheet and write my cylinder formula on my paper. That is always our first step of criteria. So volume equals pi radius squared times height. Okay, so our first step is always writing our formula. Our second step is what I've called the calculator step. So we are always going to write out all the things we're going to put in the calculator. Sometimes it's going to be 5 and 6 things we're multiplying. So we need to have all of that written down. So you should be checking that you have volume equals. We've talked about how we do not use the pi button. We always, it's very understood in math and in this Eureka lesson that we use the rounded version of pi, which is 3.14. Was I given the radius in this shape? What was I given? The diameter. So if I was given the diameter of 8, how would I get the radius? It is cut in half. Very good. So if the radius of this shape is 8 centimeters, then it is understood that if the diameter of this shape is 8 centimeters, it is understood that the radius is 4 centimeters. So we're not going to write out 4 squared. That can be confusing, and we're trying to get to where we don't have anything that's confusing with this exponent right here. So we're going to understand that radius squared, we're going to write out the radius times itself 2 times, which in this case is 4 times 4. What is the height of this cylinder? That is our last piece. We have pi, we have radius squared, we need height now. What is the height? 12. All right, so we have all of our pieces. So I'm going to say it has a blank for volume equals. So I'm going to my calculator, and I am going to say 3.14 times 4 times 4 times 12 equals 602.88. So if I have volume equals 602.88 centimeters, this is a 3-dimensional shape. So we're going to make this answer cubed. So volume would equal 602.88 centimeters cubed. Okay. If you need to pause and copy that, you can. But as we move on to number 2, I want you to see that is a different shape. So it is a different formula. So I'm going to go now and identify what shape is this? What volume are we solving for here? Cone, right? And so we talked about the difference of the cone. I'm going to kind of remind you of that. A cone is the exact same formula as a cylinder. What is the only difference in their formulas? What does the cone's volume formula have? It has what? It has 1/3 and then the same pieces, pi radius squared times height. So if we have a cylinder, a cone, if you actually stacked up 3 next to it, is 1/3 of that shape. So if we take this exact cylinder formula, we're essentially dividing it by 3 when we multiply it by 1/3. That's why all the other pieces, all the other dimensions are the same, and cone we add in that times 1/3. So let's check our calculator step here. The first thing we should be entering in the calculator is 1/3, which is 1 divided by 3. For pi, we use the rounded version of 3.14. Were we given radius or diameter in this problem? Were we given radius or diameter in this problem? Look at this. What is it specifically pointing to? This is specifically pointing to radius, and the biggest sign there is that the line ends. This line was connected for this first one all the way across. That means it's diameter. This line specifically ended in that middle piece to the end. That's radius. So you don't have to cut anything by 2. This is radius. So how would I write out radius squared? What do I do? I've written 1/3. I've written pi. How can I represent radius squared in my calculator step? 6 times 6. I'm literally going to break down the radius times itself 2 times. Lastly, I need to count for the height. What is the height of this cone? 14. So you should have all of this written out. And then we're going to go to our calculator and say, open parentheses, 1 divided by 3, close parentheses, times 3.14 times 6 times 6 times 14. Make sure all of that's in your calculator. Oops. I don't think I closed the parentheses. 1 divided by 3 times 3.14 times 6 times 6 times 14. There we go. All right, and we don't have to round this. It came out in the hundredths place already. So we're going to say that volume equals 527.52. Let's go back to our units. See, we're talking yards here. And this is a three-dimensional figure, so my units are cubed. Okay? Answer the door for me, please. All right. And lastly, so we have done a cylinder, we have done a cone, and lastly, we are going to do a sphere. He's not here. And lastly, we are going to do a sphere. So I did not straight up say the word sphere in there. You're going to have to kind of understand, if I don't give you a picture, what shape this would be. I hope we know that a basketball is not a cylinder or a cone. It's a sphere, right? So take a second. We're going to write sphere, and we're going to write the formula. So volume would equal 4 divided by 3 times pi radius. And be careful with this part. This is the only one where radius is cubed. Sorry about that. So sphere, we wrote our formula. Volume equals 4/3 times pi times radius cubed. So I want you to think about how for a cone, your volume only has 1/3. Multiplying anything by 1/3 is going to make it smaller. And we just talked about how this shape is about 1/3 of this shape. So we literally split it by 3, and that's how we're getting the smaller volume for the cone. However, for a sphere, for something like a basketball, this has a much bigger volume because it's taking up literally more space. So multiplying by something by 4/3 is multiplying it by a number that's bigger than 1. If I multiply it by 3/3, that would be multiplying it by 1, but I'm multiplying it by a whole 1 and more. So it's going to make it infinitely larger, as well as I'm not just doing the radius times itself twice. I'm going to be doing radius times radius times radius. So it's going to be taking up much more space when we're talking volume. Was I given the diameter or the radius for this basketball? Diameter. So I never use diameter. We notice diameter is never in any of our formulas. What is the radius if the diameter is 14 inches? 7. All right. I don't have height either on this one. So I have enough information. I'm going to go do my calculator step and say that volume would equal 4 divided by 3 times 3.14. Then it's going to say radius cubed. So that is literally going to be radius times radius times radius. What was the radius of this basketball again? So I'm just going to fill in what? 777. That simple. Now, we talked about a minute ago that, and you kind of can see, a sphere is typically going to be your largest amount of volume because it is clearly taking more space than this. And that's what volume measures, how much space something takes up. So volume is going to equal, clear your calculator, open parentheses, 4 divided by 3 times pi, we use 3.14, times 7 times 7 times 7. Okay, now we have a big number, which we expected, and we're going to have to round. So we're going to write 1,436. We're going to go, we talked about we round to the hundredths place. So we're going to look at the thousands place and tell us if it rounds up. Will that 6 make this 2 round up? Yes. So this would be 0.03. Our unit here is inches, and a sphere is definitely a three-dimensional figure. So your final step should say that volume equals 1,436.03 inches cubed. Okay, remember that we write our formula every time. We write our calculator step of everything we're going to put in, and then a volume equals with a unit cubed.